Today we're going to talk about using value to create shadow. You can see that artists study the highlights and shadows on an object and also beneath an object. We're going to talk about that one beneath the object, which is called cast shadow. You can see it's the same shape as the object, and you can see that it's a darker tone than the light around it. On this sketched version, you can see all of these areas of light and dark. And then down at the bottom, we can see the cast shadow. And then deep underneath the object is the occlusion shadow, where it's even darker. Jim Dine used shadows to make his objects pop and also make them look more lifelike, like they're lying on a table or leaning against a wall. He wasn't going for realism, but it did add some depth to his artwork, meaning it looks like you can poke your finger through the paper. Practice some cast shadows on a piece of paper. I'm drawing a sphere shape, and then I'm going to draw an equally wide circle beneath my original object. I'm going to use feathery strokes in one direction to try and color in that cast shadow in one even color on the opposite side from my light source. A lot of the times during practice, an artist will use an arrow to show and remind themselves where their light source is coming from. So opposite from the light source is your shadow. And I even did a darkened little occlusion shadow under that sphere too. The trick with shading is to do as gradual and gentle of a gradient as you can. In most cases, light moves in a scattered way, and so you have to imagine tiny particles or rays of light moving in a most soft way. Even a shadow that looks hard-edged at first might have some blur between it and the light, just a little bit. Gentle, feathery strokes help make it look like light is really casting a shadow on your paper. So after you try a few different objects, we will get special tools to add nice, deep, dark, rich shadows onto our artwork today. We're using regular school number 2 pencils in our sketchbook, but you're going to get some charcoal to add your shadows on your Jim Dine art piece. Notice that I am making my shadow about as wide as my object, but it can be a short shadow or a long shadow depending on the angle of the light. And here, this picture is weird because I have all these different light sources and angles. So for your art piece, I want you to decide on a light source. Here, I'm gonna put this little arrow here. You can pencil one on your table very lightly and erase it, or you can pencil it on your paper and erase it. And then I'm going to show you charcoal pencil. And these have to be sharpened every so often, but it's a clean way of adding a super dark charcoal line onto your art. So with the light source coming from the upper left, that means the lower right of all of my objects is going to get a shadow. And I am going to keep the shadow relatively thin, although I might make it about a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to take my time coloring the shadow deeply and darkly with the charcoal. Even though this video is sped up, inside the hole there will also be a shadow. And I have to keep in mind, it's not just the lower portion, but also kind of the lower right portion of my objects with the shadow, because my light is in the upper left. And then the next thing I do is use a stump to do some blending. A stump is a clean way of blending. I actually prefer my fingertip, but I wanted this to be an option for you to try today, and you'll have to share with your table. Sometimes people actually roll up or fold a tight paper so they can make their own paper stump. Newsprint works best. This is an actual charcoal stick, and I am liking the way that it is even darker and deeper than the charcoal pencil. And now I'm using my finger to do that really gentle gradient blend out off into the white of my paper to make it look like a real shadow that gradually lightens as it moves out. You're going to do all of the objects on your paper with their shadow in the same direction. So I wouldn't suddenly put my shadow on the top of my last brush. I would do it in the same area. And sometimes you need advice on how to do this to make it look right. Here's my final item being shaded and then blended with a fingertip. And I'm using the corner of this charcoal for total accuracy. I'm looking very closely at where the charcoal is touching the paper to make sure it's going next to the object instead of on top. Have fun.